Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the transformative power of coaching with my guest, Ed Temple. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who want to stop suffering in relationship and who want a deeper sense of love and connection. I coach them how to do it and how to be the best version of themselves and live the life they love. In this bonus episode, you will hear my conversation with a really smart guy by the name of Ed Temple. He is a transformative coach and visionary author of the book, The Leader as Coach. He's also created an AI coach. He'll share some insight into how you can benefit from coaching and all that it offers. So stick around. You just might learn something. It's the Men on the Path to Love podcast. Welcome, Ed, to Men on the Path to Love.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on today. I'm really curious what you're all about. I want to hear more about your book, The Leader as Coach, and your Sprout coaching model and your work with AI and everything. I'd like for you to start off by telling me your story. How did you get to where you are today? And tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, I'll maybe center it kind of focused around coaching and how I got into coaching. I had a previous career and lots of other things that I've done, but it came through a person and a really great coaching conversation and example. It was actually a childhood friend of mine in high school, his dad, who later in life became a coach. He was a successful executive and president of an institution and became a coach. So I had stayed in contact through his son, and we got connected through coaching. And he served as a really good, both a coach and mentor. He's somebody obviously older I looked up to, but the way that he approached me, I was a young and up and coming leader in my 30s, really hungry and desiring to grow and advance. And I remember asking him, why is it that you coach? What is it about? I appreciated what he did with me. I appreciated the impact that it had on me. And it's the way that he talked about it that really caught my attention and really set me on the path to discover more and just be more interested. He talked about coaching as being a sacred space. Mm-hmm. And I said, what's that about? What do you mean? And he said, well, when you get in behind the curtain with a leader and you have an impact on a leader, then everybody that leader comes in contact with changes. And I just really appreciated the use of sacred because it was kind of one of those words that I was like, oh, that's interesting. It caught my attention.
Right.
And the more and more I've done it, and now when I teach coaching, I often talk about it as that kind of space around the impact that you can have on people through a coach approach. And that's kind of what turned me on to coaching and set me down the path around going to school and becoming a coach and all of those kinds of things.
Well, and it sounded like it had a huge impact on you, probably the style that you coach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that story complements a second story because that got me interested professionally in coaching. Mm-hmm. When I started to learn about coaching and having my own coach ask me good questions and helping me become more reflective and appreciating and thinking about the impact I have on people in regards to my influence, the way I show up, how I'm behaving, that really kind of came home one day when I came home to my son. And he was only about 7 years old at that time. Now he's 20. And when I came home, he said to me innocently, just asked the question, how come work gets the good daddy and we get the grouchy daddy?
Wow.
That really rocked my world. And it was an eye opener of going, okay, wait a second. I'm having an impact here at home that I'm not intending, but he's obviously picking up on it. And it's such an innocent comment. I still tease him about it to this day to say, you changed my world, because that feedback helped me understand that I was showing up in a way that I don't want to live with that kind of way of showing up. And so it got me rethinking, turning my world upside down to say, wait a second, no, it starts here with him, with my family. That's where I give my energy, my primary things. And work gets the other stuff. But as one of those things, it just kind of flipped. And if I didn't have a coach, if I wasn't in that coaching space to understand when you get feedback, you need to be reflective around the impact that you're having on people around you. And sometimes they say things that are clues to that. If I didn't have that kind of sensitivity, I would have missed it. I would have been defensive, or I would have kind of just, and said something that kind of made it go away, but really it wasn't going away. But I really appreciated how the coaching had an impact for me to really hear that and then start to make changes in relationship to that.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that was a blessing in disguise because as a coach myself, I've experienced a lot of the coaching jargon and, you've got to, you got to put everything into it and don't listen to what your family says. Don't listen to this, and it's really, you're doing this for you and your family, so you got to make them part of that priority. And for you to shift like that, that's an amazing shift.
Yeah, and it really comes down to like the heart of coaching. And what I find interesting is coaches can often talk like that, but when I have the ability to talk about that in a very corporate space where that's not the way you talk in
Right.
the corporate world. But when you talk in ways that people can get it, because at the end of the day, I'm in the room with the door closed and it's still just people.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't be surprised about how often these things touch those deeper things that are professional conversations, professional context, and they touch things that I think are really important. And it's sacred. It's
Hmm.
a person's identity. It's who they are. It's who they're becoming. It's who they want to be. Those are the kinds of conversations we're having in the midst of delivering results for the business, right? Those things are always crossing lines. I can be surprised, but I'm not surprised by it anymore. How often those things, when they touch those deep things, how it can turn emotional or profound very quickly just by a question, just
Sure.
by something as of giving space and helping people connect with those things that are relevant and important to them. Which I mean, again, professionally, that is important. It's just there's so much more to life that's important as well. And this is really about broadening horizons to see how it fits in other areas in your life as well.
And I think part of being a good coach is bringing that vulnerability out because it's so important to have that in order to move forward, no matter what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, and so I would share with you this that like my belief about what coaching is
Hmm.
I say it like this. Everybody is on a journey. And if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, it's that idea of the hero's journey, right? And so the hero's journey is kind of that thing that we find in every culture, every historical story, every religion. And it's kind of personified in the Star Wars, the Return of the Jedi, right? The Jedi is a great example of that. That's my way of looking at coaching. Anybody whose office I walk into is my thinking is I'm here to help them become the hero of their story, whatever that might look like. And I am working out how to become the hero of my story. And it's in that connection where you have empathy and relationship and connection that's how we change. It's by interacting and sharing those things. That it's often not me sharing a lot, but it's that I'm connected with that for myself. I know that this conversation is actually about those kinds of things for them, even when they're bringing business problems and those kinds of things. Is I know my perspective is I'm here to help them become the hero of their story, whatever that looks like for them. And I think that's the thing about the value of coaching and how it does deliver results. It does help people be better business leaders, but it's so much more than that as well. And I think both of those things can be happening at the same time.
And part of what I'm hearing you say is there's a certain amount of vulnerability as a coach that you have to show too.
Yeah.
Not your whole hand and totally transparent because you want to be that neutral person, but at the same time, when you show your vulnerability, it opens them up to take in more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing about non-directive coaching, because one of the things is I would say is that there's a real muddying of the waters of what is meant by coaching. And I have to say most of people's expectations and thoughts of coaching is kind of a telling people how to do things. So they kind of expect that I'm going to come in and give them tips and tricks and I'm a smart business person, so I know the way, so I'm there to really teach them. They really have a mentor teaching model in their mind around what coaching is. When they get involved in coaching with somebody like myself and many other coaches, they often learn through a couple conversations, they realize, oh, you're not really telling me what I should do. You're helping me discover something about myself. And I go, yeah, that's it. And so that discovery does come through. I will on occasion share a part of my story or share something that's been helpful to me. And it is always followed up with a question. What, if anything, is helpful to you about my story? And the story shared in like 1 to 3 sentences. Literally, I don't share 5 minutes. It's
No,
that one
no.
thing to help make a connection, them connecting with themselves more, not about seeing me and my story, but that story, that mirroring goes, oh yeah, I understand my story differently.
Right. If you're going on 5 minutes with your story, it all becomes about you. That session's about you. It's not about your client. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can feel that difference, right? When you go on too long, the shifting goes from them exploring, reflecting, thinking to what are you saying? What are you about? And it shifts towards, and that's what you want to stay away from as a coach is that this is not about me. It's actually about you.
Right. Shifting that focus for
And it
sure.
can be done it's a skill that develops over time. It's really about how do you share a story that helps create a connection and awareness within that person, but doing it within a sentence or two.
Hmm.
And I think of an example. I had a good coaching conversation with somebody who's going through, challenging time, with some health stuff. And they're talking about having conversations with people in their family about it. And it's getting more serious. And it was a lighthearted conversation from them. And I was thinking, oh, this doesn't seem that lighthearted to me. But
Mm.
in a sentence, I just shared about my last conversation with my dad and what I liked and appreciated about it and what was missing for me. Again, in a sentence, I said, what if anything's helpful to you? And it just shifted their thinking around it. And they then were rethinking their own approach to what the conversation they were going to have with their family. And it just came through one sentence of, hey, here's what my experience was. What's helpful to you about that? And right away, and I knew it would hit the mark because they started to rethink their experience. They weren't trying to think of mine. It wasn't about mine. It was about them hearing and paying attention to themselves more through that story.
And that's where the truth growth comes in, I think, is when they can reflect and
Mm.
actually seek the answer for themselves,
Yeah.
and with maybe some guidance. But when they can really internalize that, the potential for the growth is much stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something really key there because it's about insight, their own insight. And I'd say, and this is a subtle difference, but many people do not understand it. The guidance I provide is through a coaching framework, not through what they're going through. They provide their own guidance. So what we say in coach training is they are the expert on their topic, the thing that they bring to coaching. They are living that. I am the expert on what coaching does, the framework of coaching, following a process and a model, and then doing and being all sorts of things in that conversation. I'm not the expert on the thing that they're going through. They are the expert. And that's part of the belief is they have everything they need to navigate this. They don't need my advice, but what they do need from me is a sense of connection, because it's through connection, community that we change. And then the second thing is I'm going to facilitate a process for them that will inevitably help them discover something about themselves that they were not capable of discovering on their own. They could just do this on their own. They just do it. And it's like, no, there's something that happens with another person in the room. And again, I'd come back to that's a sacred thing when you're doing it. It's
Sure.
changing people. When you get to go into that, I say, treat it as sacred. It's important. It's consequential. It's a real gift when you can be part of that.
I have a coach as well. The coach has a coach, and for me, it's having that other person not only to be accountable to, helps me get stuff done, to take action, and then also getting some feedback. And we can try to do that ourselves, yet you get much further. I find I get much further having a coach on board to help me through, and that's what I do for my clients as well.
Nice. And you're right. Like there's a variety of different approaches to coaching. So it's not just one. What I'm really talking about typically is kind of what you see at a very senior level where people are very smart, are working on really complex things, and there's not just one way forward.
Hmm.
And it's that space of helping them discover the things that are holding them back, which often comes around beliefs and values and those kinds of things. But there's other good forms where there is more direction. I think of coaching for managing and growing a business, whether it's a small, medium enterprise, right? There's more coaching that has kind of models and frameworks that people use, which I also really appreciate, which has different nuance to it. And so coaching is diverse in how it can be offered as well.
And case in point, as a relationship coach for men, I have to, show them the way,
Yep.
and then hopefully get them to see, and then again embody that, internalize that, and practice, practice, practice.
That's a good thing is, I mean, that's the nature of how you have a relationship with people, right? They know that's what you're about. You have expertise on that. You have a sense of a clear vision on what that's meant to be. And that's why people are drawn to it because they're looking for that. And there's a ton of value for that. And there's a lot of different forms of that. The market is very diverse for what is out there. And I think that's a really healthy and valuable thing. When I talk about coaching, I am talking about it kind of as a coach trainer that train leaders to learn coaching as a model and as a system, and then they figure out ways of how to apply it. And so then there'll be a mix of how they use it in a world where people need some direction and need a mix of different things that they're doing. My book is really about just teaching a coaching framework in relationship to the International Coaching Federation core competencies of what they say coaching is, which is a very clear, there's 8 of them. This is what coaching is in a non-directive manner. So I really speak about it in a non-directive way, which understanding there's lots of other forms of coaching as well.
So the name of your book is The Leader as Coach. Tell me a little bit more about what that means.
It comes from a conviction that I think taking a coach approach with people, I think is the most consequential leadership skill you can develop. There's lots of important leadership skills you need, but it's the one that as you continue to grow through it, as you advance into more senior levels, it becomes more and more valuable over time. And so the thing that I'm passionate about that I really give myself to is helping leaders learn a coach approach and then navigate when do you need to take that a coach approach? It's not always. There's a lot of other things and hats that you have to wear as a leader. But what I really want people to understand is get really comfortable with coaching as a model and as a skill, and then become really expert at knowing when to use it. So for example, some of the shift is you go from, just a leader who serves on a team, and you start to see that, me adding something to the meeting at the team is not always the best approach. Sometimes asking a good question is a better way to add value. So it's a matter of identifying those things. Same thing with your people that you're leading. When people come in and they have some questions around, hey, how do we do this? Or what do you want from this? They need direction from their leader. You need to still be able to wear that hat and give lots of direction. But then there's those times where they come in and they bring a problem that's really complex, that there's not one answer. You have a perspective, but it's not necessarily the right perspective. So you think of, for example, they have a team member that they're having a hard time with, right? They have a team member that they just worked on a project. They had some misunderstandings and they kind of didn't leave things really well. And now they have some issues going on that is interfering with their performance to work together. They come to you and say, you know what, things aren't right in this relationship, and I got to figure out how to have a conversation about what happened. There's 100 different ways you could approach that. That's a good time for the leader to say, I need to ask some questions to help them figure out a way forward. They don't need my advice on this. They need me to coach them through it. And so typically, whenever you're dealing with people-focused issues that have to do with people, not technical expertise, that's typically the time that a coach approach, a non-directive approach, can be most impactful. So what I really want is leaders to understand that as a skill and then know when to use it and how to use it effectively.
Using the coach, football coach, baseball coach, the athletic coach, you're trying to get your individual and the team to perform at their best and to succeed. Yeah. And so that's the goal, right?
That's a great metaphor, the sports metaphor, because there's a couple ways to look at that. One is the idea that when we're working with people, when you're working with kids that are 8 or 9 years old, I played soccer growing up. When you're young, I used to have a coach, really great coach. He told me and led me a lot of ways, led me through drills, held my hands, told me where to go, and just, gave me so much guidance. But as I got into college and was playing, and I played at a higher level, the coaches don't deal with you like that anymore. They don't put you through drills where they hold your hands to walk through things. They're now much more working through your mindset, your beliefs, your thinking about the game. And if you look at a professional level, I love hockey. I played a lot of ice hockey growing up, but you think of like professional players and you see them on the benches. What are they doing? They're all looking at the pads, watching themselves. Coaches come there and aren't saying you should have done this. They're saying, what are you seeing? What could have done? What would have happened here? They ask more questions. And the coaching, the advanced coaching, especially like in the NHL now, the commentators are all talking about how it's changed over the last 10 years. And they all focus on it's about how they manage the relationship with the players. Yes. It's not the schemes, it's the relationship. That's the advanced way. And that's what I'm talking about, that non-directive approach is it's the elite athlete kind of perspective, is asking good questions and helping people figure things out. It's not like the directive side is when people are younger, less mature, and they need more direction. There's times when you need it, but this is more of the elite athlete perspective.
Yeah, and once you get to that elite level, they can always hone their skills a little bit more, but it becomes the mental game at that point. Like, I've got the skills, it's the mindset.
Yeah. And that's that's what you're doing as you advance as a leader, is you need to learn to engage with your people in a more refined way and in a way that's really helpful about getting the best out of them. Right. And a lot of you know this, right, is like, if you are giving direction to somebody who's quite smart and quite motivated and driven internally, it's going to frustrate them. Don't tell them how to do it. Just set the bar high and let them chase it. That's what you want to be doing. And that's the thing is, again, not all people respond to this approach really effectively. In my book, I talk about that. I kind of have a bit of a grid around identifying the different kinds of skills and will of people, and how do you work with those people who are motivated differently and have different skill levels. And so this is the classic, the high performers respond to the coach approach much better. And if you try to manage and tell them what to do and how to do it, it is so frustrating. I myself have left jobs because of it. I know other people have left jobs because of it, because they want a leader who believes in them, is there to support them, but basically set the bar high and kind of, in a sense, say, go get it, and then check back in with me according to what you need from me.
Don't micromanage me.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, some people need that kind of management because they've shown themselves that they don't have the motivation, they don't have the skill, and you need to kind of approach that differently. But the people who kind of proven themselves otherwise, don't take that approach because it will just scare them away.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where the coach approach really can be effective.
And it's meeting them where they are so you can get the most out of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a skill to try to figure that out.
And that's another thing I talk about in the book is changing the idea of the performance feedback conversation
Hmm.
is to look at yourself as a leader as my primary responsibility is development. I help people grow. Yeah, I got to manage performance too, but that's not the main thing. It's actually a smaller thing. You do need to manage performance, but overall, so for example, performance management conversations and feedback conversations can facilitate a person's growth. You actually want to focus on their growth, not just get them to change behaviors and be compliant. So it's
Hmm.
a matter of like, hey, what's your perspective on this? This is what my perspective is. What could be done differently to be more effective? You want them owning that and having the full accountability on their shoulders, not yours as a leader. And that's what coaching's kind of tapping into.
And they're not doing it for you as the leader, they're doing it for themselves to improve themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That was
And
well
that's
said. Yeah.
and that's how I with relationship, it's being the best version of yourself for yourself first,
Yep.
and then bring that to your relationship. And tying this into relationship, how do you see this tying in with men on the path to love?
So I'll give you a really practical thing around research, around coaching and AI. I know this is going in a bit of a different direction with technology, but
Yeah, I want to hear it.
we are becoming more and more isolated and it's more and more detrimental. So it's a matter of how do we help go back to more connections, right? We need more of it. The research is very obvious. It's quite clear that we need that. So one of the things I've done is I've created an AI coach. And so the AI coach does what I do around the model. It asks good questions. It follows the same model that I teach. And you know what? It does about 80% of what I do really effectively, maybe
Wow.
90%. Right. And it's a really brilliant. It's Coach with Sprout on the App Store, still free because it's a tech demo. So you can use it. It won't always be free. But if you want to get coached on any topic, it takes a non-directive approach and it does it really effectively. But here's the thing is what I'm focusing on now is the 10 or 20% it can't do. And I don't think it will ever do. The first thing is connection.
Hmm.
AI can't create a connection. Only a human to human can make a connection. We crave that. We need it. And that's actually how we change. It's not just the coaching and the questions, it's through the connection. So I know the future of my coaching and any coaching is my ability to create connection. The other thing is we play in the space of identity about who am I? Who am I becoming the hero of my story. I mean, an AI can ask questions about that, but it has no identity. I do. I know the struggle. I know what it's like to try to attain something and fail. I know what it's like to get back up and try those things. And so with that comes wisdom. And so that's where coaching also operates around this sense of growing in our identities, becoming something. And that relates to the final thing around what AI can't do, and that's transcendence. We have a longing to reach out and become something more than we are. It's putting the building blocks of our life and attaining something more. It's that longing, that desire. And I look at it in the realm of like going to Mars, like that's a human thing because it's that longing to reach the stars. We have that built within us.
Hmm.
The other thing I would say about that too is I think that's the expression of spirituality that we have in all of our cultures, that desire to reach out and touch beyond. And so that's the thing that I'm focusing on. And so what I'd say, what the AI is actually teaching us and some of the research that's coming back is young people who use AI. What it creates in them is a desire to connect with humans.
Hmm.
It's doing the opposite. So as they do more of that, they go, oh, this would be nice to have this kind of conversation with another human. And so the reason why I've created, it's actually just a tool for leaders to learn coaching. It's not meant to replace coaching. I don't think it will, right? It'll replace a bunch of the things, but it won't replace my ability to connect, work with identity, talk about transcendence. So what I want for other people is to learn those skills to create more connections with their people, that they realize that that is the gift that they offer as a leader.
Right.
Managing performance, anything that can be automated, you have to know that AI can replace that very easily. And so that idea is that as we look to the future, we have to realize that it's that other part that becomes exponentially important. It's less, it's 10 or 20%, but it becomes exponentially more important and more potent. So my ability to connect, that will be the currency of the future. That's what I believe about coaching.
Sure. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying, like, you can try to do this stuff on your own. And I actually had one of my clients asking AI questions, about what's going on in his relationship and so on. And he goes, but Bill, I couldn't wait to get back to talk to you about this, so
Yeah, yeah,
that's part of what you're saying. It's that human connection. And
yeah.
that's what we're all about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add this because here's something else that I've been working on. I'm trying to figure out how to put it into my next book about the future of leadership in an AI world. That's
Hmm.
the concept that I'm working on. But
Hmm.
I've had this experience myself with my coach, and I've had this with numerous clients. And one of the things the question comes down to is, who are you? I mean, that's not a starter question, but it sometimes comes up in coaching. And the context that comes up in coaching is when people are seeing themselves as their job. That
Mm-hmm.
happens often. Sometimes that's, oh, well, and they start to see. So, for example, I was working with a person who we've been working with for quite a while, about 10 months. We were near the end of our engagement, and they suddenly saw the writing on the wall that they might be terminated. They were growing, there's acquisition, some shuffling going on, and they saw that they may not be part of the future here. They'd invested so much, decades. And it was one of those profound things that they were at a loss. They were just so like flabbergasted. And they were saying things like that. And just it felt like the right question in the moment is to say, well, who are you? Like beyond this job. And they looked at me and they were just like, and I just remember the look was, I have no idea.
Yeah,
Without this job, I have no idea. And I was like, okay,
I see that a
that's
lot.
okay. And that's a question we're all trying to figure out. So again, not every coaching conversation comes around those things, but that's my conviction around we are actually figuring that out.
Yeah.
Who are we beyond the thing that we do? And I remember I was asked that, who are you? And I said, well, I'm a dad, I'm a this, I'm a that. He was like, oh, well, that's all things you do. Who are
Yeah.
you beyond that?
Those are roles you're playing. Yeah.
Those are roles you're playing. They're hats you wear, that kind of thing. And so what I came around, and I've seen it happen with other clients, is, my coach asked me, well, who were you when you were born?
Mm.
I was like, oh, that's a good question. Okay. So if I went back, that was before I could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question was like, who are you when you leave this life? It was one of those questions I thought a lot about. I thought, well, who was I when I was born? Who will I be when I leave this life? I discovered the answer. It's loved.
There you go.
I was loved when I came into the world. I'll be loved when I leave it. And I think probably more accurately is the word beloved.
Mm.
And I've had other coaching conversations. They discover the same thing without me telling them that. They come down to the same answer. I go, oh, that's interesting. Because I remember having a coaching conversation. I was ready to shout the answer because it's just, well, who are you? And they thought, well, who are you when you're born? Who are you when you leave this world? And then they came back. It was very emotional. Like, well, I'm loved. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I have the same answer. And
Yeah.
so to me, everything else in between is trying to figure out what does it look like to live out of a place of being loved. If you truly believed you are beloved, how would you live differently? How would that change your interactions at work, at home, any interactions? And I think it's out of that core that we figure everything else out.
That's huge. From the core. Love is the core there.
Yeah. I was appreciated this conversation, the opportunity to talk, because I thought, yeah, I'm kind of discovering some of these things and coming down to, I think, some of the things that you are leading and your convictions are aligned with mine as well. And that's the thing is I'm kind of going, well, how does that shape what I think about what I do, how I try to teach it, what I feel called to do? This AI and coaching is part of that expression, because in creating the AI and trying to figure out how to build that and do that, I go, at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's actually about the other thing. It's about the
Right.
connection. It's about
Sure.
the other things about coaching that I think is really important for people. That the technology, I see it as a tool to help lead and learn how to coach. Not because that's the end. The tech isn't the end. The tech's just a tool to actually just discover who you are and how do you be a better leader through this sense of taking a coach approach.
Wow. Well, Ed, you're doing some great stuff, man. And I really love your approach to coaching and your perspective on AI and everything else. Any last minute things you want to share before we wrap things up?
No, I appreciate that. I think one of the questions I'm coming around is there's a lot of fear around like emerging technology like AI and about how it'll impact us. And so I think that was my experience as well. And I kind of ran into it to say, I think there's learning to be, I'm just going to run to it, even though it's something I'm hearing that it can replace what I do. What do
Hmm.
I do with that? And again, one of the learnings out of that is that nothing, and I deal with this in coaching all the time, nothing generative comes out of negative ways of looking at it. For example, fear. You don't generate new thinking and innovative and create connections out of fear, right? It's out of love that you do that. But so then I was thinking, well, how do we get it into the place of the innovation and creativity for the future? And so I think that's in community, it's together, we do that. But I think the big question that we have moving forward is this is so disruptive. So how is it going to redefine our lives, our society, and those kinds of things?
Right.
It will be redefined. It's just a matter of how do we get on the front end to be part of the redefinition? Because there are so many things in AI that will replace traditional ways of working and doing. It doesn't mean suddenly nobody has value to offer and what to do, but we have to figure it out. And I think it's a matter of how do we get ourselves into a space to be part of what it's becoming instead of just reacting and being fearful, because our best thinking doesn't come out of the fearful state. So it's a
No.
matter of how do you get yourself in a position to be in a good state, to be thinking through of the opportunity and the hopefulness and what is possible with these things. And one of the things I would say is that the coach approach is typically always appreciative inquiry, positive focused, because we know our better thinking is related to that. And so that's what I focus on in asking people questions, that when they're thinking out of that negative kind of thing, how do I help them connect with the more positive side? What's the questions that will help them tap into those things that will help them generate new ideas, get more creative, get more innovative, and hopeful and optimistic for the future? So that's the thing that I just hope for others listening, that they go, who are the people I need to connect with that will help me be in that space? They can be friends and colleagues, the people who are optimistic, that are hopeful, that are exploring, because it's all about learning. It's not about like your future and what job you might have or how you do. It's about learning. And if you're always learning, always growing, you're going to be fine. That's a good place to be. No matter what you get paid, learning and growing is the point.
Absolutely. And that's a lifelong journey for sure.
Yes.
And even with the AI, it's having some curiosity about how this can evolve in a positive way and can benefit us, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, Ed Temple, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day today to talk about what you do. Tell us again about the name of your book and how people can get the book, or how they would want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, it's The Leader as Coach on Amazon. theleaderascoach.co is the website where you can see the information for my speaking, the book, and ordering it and getting the app. The app on both app stores is called Coach with Sprout. It teaches you the model, and the key thing here is the AI coach, so you can be coached. It's a tech demo, so it's free. I'm looking for feedback through it, and we're in the midst of revamping it. It'll be a different type of thing in the future. Give it a try, see what it is, and stay tuned, because you might be listening to this in the future when the new version is available. And then I'd also just invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I like to share things online, share the thought leaders that I think are important to be listening to, reposting and liking their stuff. I don't put a ton of content out there. I'm really a matter of kind of making connections and learning myself. Mm-hmm. So I always appreciate new connections on LinkedIn, and see how I can support your journey. So send me a direct message anytime. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And then finally, the Leaders Coach program is at Lethbridge College. It's a International Coaching Federation accredited program. So if you want to become a coach, you can go. But really, it's a great program if you're a leader as coach. It's meant for you. It's a cohort model that's delivered virtually over 3 months.
That's awesome. Well, I'll have that contact information and all that stuff in the show notes for those who didn't get it all at that. Maybe they're driving, they can't write it down or whatever. It'll be in the show notes. So, all right. Once again, Ed Temple, thanks so much for joining me today on Men on the Path to Love, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Bill, and you as well. I look forward to staying in contact and watching what you do. I appreciate what you do. Really important work. So thanks for including me in it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. And on that note, I will bring this episode to a close. The Transformative Power of Coaching with my guest, Ed Temple. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. Thank you for listening. And thanks to my guest, Ed Temple, as well. You can find links to Ed's contact information, his book, and more in the show notes. Coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, have you ever found yourself in a situation where your past relationship haunted your current relationship? Maybe you were dumped or cheated on, and you were really hurt, and you think your current spouse or partner will do the same to you. Well, in the next episode, you'll hear Cameron's story and how holding on to his past relationship stories created a shit show in his marriage. Find out why it's a good idea to let go of your relationship stories and how to do it. Please join me for the Let That Old Story Go, Freeing Yourself from Past Loves episode. Now, if you know someone you think might get something out of listening to this podcast or would like to post on your social media, please do. Share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.